The war really hasn't started yet. Israel's ground offensive has not yet started. And unfortunately, it's usually a costly venture, but we have to do what we have to do. Azat Hashem. I'm glad it's not me having to make those decisions. But, the war brings up lots of questions. Of course, our class is about relationships. And already I've had questions asked that have to do with marriage and relationships and how to deal with them when you're in a situation of crisis. So I'll just say a few words about these kind of things. I'll start with the good stuff. Is that Wednesday, B'ezrat Hashem, I was supposed to officiate at a wedding for a former student of ours, actually from many, many years ago. He was here for a couple of weeks, and he was looking for a rabbi. They found me, and he was going to do their wedding in Ein Yael here in Jerusalem. He's an Oleh from America. Her parents are French, but she's Israeli. She was born here, I think. Anyways, they found each other. Beautiful, Baruch Hashem. Planning to have a nice wedding with hundreds and hundreds of people in this open air park, Ein Yael, in the south of Jerusalem. If you've been there, it's a tourist attraction. It's sort of like a zoo where they teach crafts and nature, environmental education, and they also have weddings there. It's a beautiful place, beautiful gardens. Anyways, they can't have the wedding there anymore because there's a war, and you're not allowed to gather more than 50 people, and you have to have according to the rules of the Home Command, you have to have a safe shelter close by. And so I got a notice that this is canceled, but they're not canceling the wedding. They're still going to get married. Baruch Hashem, they moved. It's going to be smaller, and they moved it to actually not far down the hill. You know what? I'm going to be in touch with them. Maybe I'll ask them if they want some yeshiva boys to come dance, because it's at the Ramada Hotel, just across the Ramada Hotel. Yeah, right here, very close. So I'll ask them if they're interested, because you guys could add some ruach. It's this Wednesday night. So. Another question I got asked. Also, there was a group of rabbis who volunteered to do weddings, and since a lot of rabbis themselves are called up to the army, they're not available to officiate, so hundreds of rabbis immediately volunteered to take their place, those who are not in the army, and it's a beautiful, heartwarming volunteerist spirit that we're seeing. But there's another question, is a Kala who's supposed to get married, and tension, nerves. So you may not be aware, but that's what we're here to talk about. That there's a mitzvah in the Torah that a man and woman are not allowed to sleep together when she's menstruating, when a woman is menstruating during her menstrual cycle. So usually before a wedding, you plan it out that they'll be permitted to each other at the time of the wedding, so that they can consummate the marriage and be with each other. Next time she gets her period, they'll have to take a break. Usually it's for a couple weeks, usually 11 days, 12 days. Depends whatever it is, because you have to have 7 clean days. That's the way we practice the halacha nowadays. And so we try to time the wedding so the wedding comes out based on, a woman has her cycle, and every approximately 30 days, 28 days, whatever it is, every woman's cycle is a little different, that she gets her menstrual cycle. And then she has to separate from her husband. And then she purifies herself, makes sure that the bleeding has stopped. And then she goes, counts 7 clean days and goes to the mikvah. That's in a nutshell, the way the system works. So you guys may not be aware of this, but this is the way Orthodox Jews, Orthodox families and couples live their lives, is that whenever the woman's menstruating, they separate. They don't have to move out. There was a tradition in Ethiopia, the Jewish community, they actually had a separate house for the woman to go live in when she was menstruating. We don't do that. I know we're all men here, but jokes aside, Jokes aside, you're allowed to live together as long as you don't touch each other. You're not intimate. Intimate relations are prohibited. So now, because of the war, it sometimes happens that couples that are planning to get married, something happens and tension can throw off a woman's cycle. And this happened where this woman called me up and she said, I'm supposed to get married. And it's not going to be in a clean time of the month, according to the schedule that we planned it. And nowadays, the truth is, many couples, what they do to ensure, because it's very hard to know ahead of time, because the cycle can be erratic. You could have a long cycle, you could have a woman could have a short cycle, and it's hard to plan. If you're going to invite hundreds of people and you spend thousands of shekels on a wedding, and you're inviting catering and the band and everything, so you don't want to take chances. So usually, what the brides do is they regulate their cycle with hormones. The pill is well known as a hormonal discovery from 50 years ago for the sake of contraception. The pill enabled people to have relations without worrying about getting pregnant. But beyond that, it's also useful for regulating the period, even if you don't want to stop having children. And there's different dosages, there's different types. Nowadays, it's a whole well-developed world of hormonal medicine that so many brides take hormones before the wedding to regulate the cycle, so that when the wedding night, she won't be prohibited to her new husband. But with all best intentions, even with hormones, it happens that it doesn't work. And the cycle gets broken for whatever reason, and I got a call. The wedding date is coming, and I'm not going to be after the mikvah, but I'm going to be before the mikvah. So what do we do? So the truth is, it's a big sugya. Talmud has pages discussing what to do. And the question is it's called a chupat nida. Chupat nida. It's a chuppah when the woman is menstruating. Nida means menstruating. So, and there's actually a matter of debate. Some rabbis throughout the ages felt that this is not a kosher wedding. The wedding's not kosher unless it could be consummated. If a couple can't be together, that's not a full marriage. And so it's a serious question, but the common consensus is, for many, many years already, is that it's still a kosher marriage if you give her the ring and she accepts the ring and you sign the ketubah and you have the chuppah and you have the witnesses and you do everything the way it should be done, even if they can't go home at night, that night, and sleep together, it's still a kosher marriage. And so that's, we don't cancel a wedding. If it happens, it's thousands of shekels. Sometimes it's tens of thousands of shekels. It depends on, how big the wedding is. It's a very difficult thing to deal with. So we usually don't cancel the wedding, and they get married. And according to most poskim, it's a proper marriage. There is some outlying opinions, but what can you do? You can't cover all your bases. And the majority of the poskim say that it's still a kosher marriage. Of course, there is a difficulty still. The marriage, the show must go on. The marriage must happen, and they get married, Baruch Hashem. But then they get home and they can't be together. Now, this is a difficult situation. They don't have to tell anybody. Nobody has to know. But maybe somebody has to know. I'll tell you why. Like I said in my introduction, Orthodox Jews live their family life regulated by the cycle of, when the woman's menstruating, they have to separate. They don't have relations, and they don't even sleep in the same bed. You're supposed to separate the beds. That's why you can buy mita yehudit. If you go to the furniture store in Israel, Everybody knows you're talking about a Jewish bed. What's a Jewish bed? Do Jews have different beds? What do we have? Horns? What do we do? What's a Jewish bed? A bed that has place for there's two holes in there for the horns? What's a Jewish bed? So, yeah, the Jewish bed is bed. There's two smaller beds that separate, that they're easily separated. Sometimes there's rollers, there's wheels underneath, so that they can easily be separated. For that 11 days or 12 days between cycles, when a woman is prohibited, they're not allowed to sleep in the same bed. So you sleep in the same bedroom, sleep in the same house, you live together, but you're not intimate. So that's the standard rules, that you're allowed to sleep in the same house. And the assumption is you don't have to separate. However, there is a rule that says if you're newly married and you have not yet been together once, at least, then there's a prohibition of yichud. Yichud means seclusion. Even though you're married, you're officially married, you get a ring.
You need a chaperone?
You need a chaperone.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the house? A chaperone in the house?
Yeah, you need to someone. So usually you take a little kid, a 12-year-old kid, sleeps in the house, and nobody has to know. You just have a cousin sleep over, or something like that. But it's because it's not like the rest of your married life, where we trust you, God trusts you, and you have to separate, but you live together because it's part of the normal cycle. Being married is that there are times that you're on, times you're off. But a newlywed couple who's never been together, it's going to be really, really hard for them to stay separate, and the law requires them to not be secluded. And so it's a tricky business. So that's what I was saying, somebody has to know. Somebody who helps you organize this, having no seclusion. It does happen. I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's not so common. Not so common, but it does happen. And I know couples, friends, relatives who had such a marriage, such a wedding, and they got over it. Whatever. It takes a few days until she goes to the mikvah, and then the rest is that's history. It's history. The rest, then they can be together on, off. They don't have to. There's no problem with them secluding together once you're married. But once you're married and you've had one relations. Now this case, the truth is, I'm still debating what to do. I have to consult and discuss it, because unfortunately, the couple the woman who called me, this Kala who called me, they're not a religious couple.
They call you still?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing. I got a few calls, interesting calls, because of the war. Unfortunately, but calls the people who are not religious, but they wanted to keep Shabbat. What can they do with their phone? All sorts of questions. One of our former students here, he flew. He flew on Shabbat. The El Al, for the first time in its history, flew on Shabbat. And gave him permission to get on the plane, to come back to be a soldier, to fight. So there's all sorts of interesting questions. Anyways, this couple is very interesting. So they live together. They live together now, before they're married. So you understand what's the point of telling them to separate after they're married? They live together. So I have to look it up whether I think the halacha still applies. They're not allowed to be secluded together after the marriage, but they're not allowed to be secluded together before the marriage either. Right now they're violating that halacha. So the fact that I'm marrying them, or that they're going to get married at some stage, it does, am I making them more forbidden? No, they're just as forbidden now as they were before. And, it's clear to me that they're not going to keep that law of prohibited seclusion, because they don't keep it now. So I'm sure they're not going to keep it after that. I hope that they'll be able to refrain from relations until she goes to the mikvah, that she is going to the mikvah. Right? Many, here in Israel, it's a little bit of a strange situation. The marriage and divorce goes is only through the rabbinate. There's no such thing as a civil marriage in Israel. And so every couple, every Jewish couple, of course, there's Muslim couples and there's Christian couples, and they have their religion, and they have their Qadi or whatever it is that marries them. But all Jewish citizens of the state of Israel have to get married through the Rabbanut. And that means that they have a kosher marriage with a chuppah, and most places they get a lesson about how to keep the laws of family purity, everything I was just describing you up till now. And why was I saying this? So every bride goes to the mikvah at least once. Even if they're a secular couple and they don't keep the laws of family purity before they get married, they don't keep the laws of family purity after they get married. They're not religious. They don't observe the laws. It happens. It's unfortunate. We have a lot of Jewish people that were not educated according to the laws of the Torah, and for whatever reasons, they're not observant. This is not new to us. We live in a country which is full of good Jews who are sacrificing their lives for the Jewish people, and they're proud Jews, but they don't keep Shabbat, and they don't keep kosher, and they don't keep the laws of family purity, and every mix of the above. Maybe they do keep Yom Kippur, maybe they fast Yom Kippur, maybe they keep a part of Shabbat, maybe they keep part of Kashrut. There's all sorts of different types of Jews and levels of observance. And so, according to the official rules of the rabbinate, to get married in Israel, you have to get married through the rabbinate, and the woman is sent to go to the mikvah. Now, if she doesn't go, nobody stands on with the police. Nobody can. They try to make it one of the paperwork is that you have to bring a note from the mikvah that you were there to show you. But in the end, most rabbis don't check. But the official system is that every bride goes to the mikvah. So at least once in their life that they're living in purity. And so this concept is well known. Everybody knows about the mikvah, that they should be going to the mikvah. Many people, maybe they don't learn well enough that they should go every month, but they think that at least they know that they should go before they get married. And so this woman knows that she's going to go. I don't know if she's going to go every month. Maybe she will. I don't know. I'm not personally her rabbi, but I'm just doing the officiating at the ceremony. I spoke to them. I meet every couple that I officiate at the wedding. I meet them first. I sit with them, and we talked about keeping Torah and mitzvot and about education of the children. Yeah, I try. I know I have 1 hour. They have an hour with an Orthodox rabbi. I should at least try to convince whatever I can that they should take their Judaism as seriously as is good for them at this point in their lives. And we have to be aware that if they're not keeping Orthodox halacha at this point, it doesn't mean that next year they won't. Maybe next year they'll get stronger. Who knows? Anything could happen. Anyway, so, I talked about it in general. I don't know. If I had to guess, maybe they will keep the laws, because this woman who asked me a question actually had a religious upbringing. She's currently not observant, somewhat. As I said, they're living together. According to halacha, you're not allowed to live together until you're married. But it's quite common in secular society that people, can't wait. So I don't know. I assume that there are many secular couples who maybe they're not so careful about kashrut, and maybe not so careful about Shabbat, but the woman goes to the mikvah once a month. She goes to the mikvah. At least that mitzvah they do. So it's hard to know. It's hard to know what people do in their homes. In any case, so this bride is expecting to go to the mikvah. She knows she wants to go to the mikvah. She's going to go to the mikvah. But now it's going to be after the wedding. not before the wedding, because the cycle got messed up for whatever reason. Things happen. So the first thing I told them is that we don't cancel the wedding. The wedding goes on. According to most poskim, it's kosher, and we have a regular wedding. You don't cancel the wedding. And there's tiny little differences in the ceremony that nobody notices. So when he gives her the ring, he should be careful not to touch her, right? That's if you're not touching, but nobody notices how he gives her the ring. And the major difference is that after the wedding, they're not allowed to be isolated together. They're not allowed to be secluded. In this case, I doubt that that's going to happen, but hopefully they won't sleep together until she goes to the mikvah at least once, at least this time, and maybe for the following years. Let's hope that they'll be inspired to keep the laws. It's not an easy one. It's not an easy one to refrain from having relations. So let's get to some other questions that I got asked relating to relationships and this war that we're in, middle of a war. There's a Yerushalmi, a passage in the Talmud, the Palestinian Talmud. Isn't that ironic? The Jerusalem Talmud is a better translation of that. And there it mentions that when there's a time of distress, when there's difficult times for the Jewish community, the example that this passage in the Talmud is speaking about is a situation of famine. When there's famine in the land, we refrain from having relations. It's not stated as a law, but it is mentioned as a custom. And the most explanations go as follows. They say that when the Jewish people are under the gun, when the Jewish people are in a difficult situation, we have to pray to Hashem, and we have to identify with the community. We can't just ignore what's going on to the greater community. And one of the ways that you can identify and show your solidarity is by minimizing your pleasure, minimizing your physical pleasure. If people are hungry for food, that's a physical pleasure. So are you really gonna, for example, the other day, last week, we were at home and we have to eat. And one of the things we like to do is we have a grill on the porch. So we barbecue up dinner instead of cooking it inside. But this week we said we're not going to barbecue. Because barbecue is like a public sort of happy thing. And, people are in trepidation and, terrible sad tragedies and sorrow that's going throughout all of us are feeling at the same time. So we made dinner, but we made it inside instead of outside, just not to publicly sort of flaunt the pleasure that we're having. So the question is, and it was raised by many people asked their rabbis this last week, are we allowed to have relations? Are we allowed to have relations, which is a private pleasure, but it's a time of war, it's a time of distress. There's even a midrash which speaks about this week's parsha. Was the world in distress in this week's parsha?
This week's parsha mentions Hamas.
That's it. Hamas is mentioned in the parsha, but of course the entire world gets destroyed. All of civilization, except for Noach and his family. Noach and his family, when they were in the ark, refrained from relations. Refrained from relations. And according to the way we read the verses, more than a year. More than a year. They were in the ark until they got out. And of course then, repopulate the world. It was a big mitzvah to have relations. But when the world is being destroyed, when bad things are happening, maybe you should refrain. It's incongruous to be enjoying yourself when the Jewish people at large are under duress and in distress. So This is a interesting question. It's not a simple answer. The Mishnah Brura, luckily enough, it discusses this because it's in the laws of fasting. Fasting. Also, we know that there's some fast days where you're not allowed to have relations. Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. But all the other fast days, it's not one of the prohibitions. Even though you're mourning, you're allowed to have relations. It's only food and drink which we fast from. There are perhaps customs which say, well, it's a day of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, for example, Asar B'Tevet. We're mourning for Jerusalem, and until the temple's rebuilt, they're days of mourning. So the Jewish people are mourning. The communal mourning maybe should override your personal pleasure, and you should refrain. So it's not an obligation, but there are customs like that on fast days. What about this period now, when we're at a period of war, and there's soldiers risking their lives, and let alone families whose a husband whose wife was kidnapped, and the opposite, or families we don't know where they are. Just crazy. It's just horrible things that we couldn't even imagine that we're going through. So is it appropriate to have relations? So let me ask you.
Yes.
Interesting.
I mean, not really, but it's inappropriate for sure. Because it's like this.
You're saying yes, you should not have relations.
Should not.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Well, why? Why?
Because the Medina, the whole nation is kind of in a state of avelut. What happened right now? There's so many people, even if we're not connected to families, but still Am Israel has all the
right. We have to identify with the Jewish people as well. We're one big family.
If you're avelut, you also don't
Oh, that's right. That's right. But when else are you forbidden from having relations? Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, and when else? When you're mourning, when you're in Avelut, when your father dies, your mother dies, you're not allowed to have relations with your wife for 7 days. It's part of the laws of mournings. So if we're mourning, if we're part of the Jewish people that are mourning every day, we're going to a different funeral. So you're saying you should not have relations. Any other ideas? Any other opinions?
To play devil's advocate, how long will this last? And then if you don't have relations and no kids, and then
that's not devil's advocate. That's a good consideration. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What are we? We're not going to have relations now for. Could be the war will last 3 months. We don't know. Could be a year. Could be longer. What? So we're not going to have Jewish children in Tafshin Pei Dalid? That's a tragedy. We're bringing it upon ourselves. What did Miriam say to her father? Well, we have a tradition that Miriam...
Pharaoh only decreed for men, and the father decreed
That's
for
right, because the father was not having children, wanted separated from his wife. He said, we can't have children, we're under Paro's distress, right? So they wanted to separate from their wives. He said, you're worse than Paro, she says to her father. His father decreed against the boys, you're decreeing against the boys and the girls. We're not going to have any children if we refrain. Good. Other comments, other ideas, please.
That's our biggest revenge against our enemies, is having large Jewish families. So we should keep producing, and also peace in the house.
Right.
If you're not having relations with your wife for so long, I feel like it will create a tension.
So you're raising another thing. First thing you said was that we have to have life to fight death. We're not a cult of death. We're a cult of life, and the best response, perhaps, these vicious angels of death, is to create more life and to live our lives. Okay, I had my barbecued meat indoors. I still had meat. I still had food. We still eat. We have to live. We have to, and we had Shabbat now. We just had Shabbat with 3 meals, and life has to go on. So that's another point. But the last thing you mentioned is some additional point, which is, I'd like to dwell on that for a moment. And that, what Jake is saying here is that having a healthy marriage includes having relations, have a healthy sexual relationship. It's part of a relationship between a husband and wife. And when you don't have relations, it can cause tensions. Relations can calm you down. It could show your love for each other. It could solidify the relationship that it's supposed to. And that's why we consider relations a mitzvah. So you're going to refrain from doing a mitzvah because you want to identify with the Jewish people as a whole, the nation. What about your wife is going crazy because she's nervous about your child in the army? What can calm you down? You're going crazy. You don't have information. You don't know. Everybody's in danger. Maybe you know people that are kidnapped. So you're going to tell the people that know somebody don't have relations. Well, then you're it's like pouring salt on the wounds. You're not allowing them to have their peace of mind. We talked about last week on the Zoom? Not all of you were there, but we talked about how our job, if you're not fighting, if you're not volunteering, our job is to take care of ourselves, to make sure that we handle the situation in the best way possible. So we have to exercise, and we have to eat well. We have to keep ourselves busy and not just scroll through the feed all day long and see.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's letting Hamas win. Watching their sadistic filming of this unspeakable, unhuman act. We shouldn't do that. So it's better to be with your wife and to have a normal relationship as much as possible. Any other ideas, comments about this question?
So if you lose, the morning,
7 days is morning.
Okay.
Right?
For close family?
Yeah.
For immediate family?
Yeah. 7 days, yeah. The prohibition on sexual relations is for the Shiva. Yeah.
A question. I cannot remember because I've been in many weddings, Jewish weddings. But do they kiss the bride and the kiss like in?
You came in a few minutes late, I think. We discussed this. They don't always kiss, but the bottom line is, in a normal wedding, the minute the bride receives the ring, they're married, and so they're allowed to touch.
When she need that, then.
Right. If she's
if
it's a chuppah nida, so then there'll be no touching. Yeah.
People will notice, like, hey, they did kiss.
Yeah, so the standard in religious circles that I'm familiar with is not so much a kiss, but it is that they hold hands. They hold hands when they leave the chuppah to go to the seclusion room, yichud room, whatever it is. So then it's even a directive from Rabbi Shapira and many others to say this is our custom. We hold hands. It's the first time they're touching. Orthodox Jews, Orthodox couples, if they do kosher dating, they're not touching at all, even though they've known each other for months. Could be longer. You're not allowed to touch each other. And now this is the first time after the chuppah, after she gets the ring, they're married. They're allowed to touch each other. The first touch is usually when they hold hands leaving the chuppah, walking out of the chuppah together. It's a beautiful moment. Some couples kiss, but public kissing is more problematic. It's not accepted in religious circles, and halachically they're allowed to, but they're going to be home. They're going to be alone at night. They don't have to be all over each other the minute they're permitted. They can control themselves a little bit. But yeah, so usually not every community does that, but some communities they don't show any public touching. No public touching. Even holding hands is not done in public in some circles. So even a married couple don't hold hands when they're going for a walk. In some communities, that's considered inappropriate. And every community has their standards. It's fine. I'm very makpid with my wife that we do hold hands in public. So I don't want my community to be one of those communities where we don't hold hands in public. It's not anything intimate. It's not anything sexual. It's a nice thing, I think, when couples hold hands, and
Healthy.
I think it's a healthy. It's not sexual in any way, but it depends on the community standard. Whatever. If you're in a community, I wouldn't do that in Bnei Brak, or in Me'esharim. I don't think that's any public touching is beyond the pale. But it depends on your community. In any case, let me just conclude because I'm looking at the clock. Somebody else wanted to speak, though. Were you raising your hand? Benjamin, you wanted to? Yeah, please go ahead.
In the Shever Kadisha,
Yeah.
after the preparation of the body,
Yeah.
we can have a relation?
Yes, no prohibition. Yeah, no prohibition. Yeah, only a mourner, the mourner himself, the relative of the deceased. In any case, what do I think? I mean, you all raised good points, and there's something that we have to consider. I think obviously it's an individual choice, because the halacha does not say that it's prohibited. The halacha, even those poskim who do quote this Yerushalmi, the passage, they most of the poskim say this is not a law. This is a midat chasidut. It's a measurement of piety. Measurement of piety, once it's on the level of not an obligation but a pious custom, so then you have all the value questions about, okay, it's a good thing to refrain, but then you have a good reason to be together. We mentioned that we have to have children. We mentioned that we have to, live our lives and have strength to manage the tense situation. There's a lot of different calculations to consider once it's a measure of piety. So, measure of piety, everybody has to choose for themselves, basically. And one point I want to make is that, we'll have to come back to talk about it more another time, is that a key point when you speak about having relations in a marriage is that you have to make these kind of decisions together. And when the husband wants to be pious, but the woman doesn't, or the opposite. The woman who wants to be pious says, how can we have relations? I know this person and that person in there, and I'm feeling so down. And the husband say, it's true, but we need to, we need to be together. And so this can bring tension between the couples. And it's important to realize that it's a decision that every couple has to make together. They have to find a way to be on the same page. And if they both want to be pious, that's a midat chasidut, that's a measure of piety. For how long, I don't know. Obviously there's other calculations as it gets longer and longer. But, I'm sure at the beginning it's going to be more painful. And, most people, after hearing such terrible news, don't want to, they don't have, they're just, their minds are not into pleasure. It's a natural human reaction. But as time wears on, it's a very big mitzvah to have this component of the relationship, to have a sexual relationship as well. And so I leave it up to the couple themselves to decide together. They have to decide together whether they want to take on this measure of piety. You can be pious in many other ways. It doesn't have to be this. It's not absolutely prohibited by the halacha. And many poskim say, again, we have to finish up here because it's lunchtime. Many poskim say that Talmud Yerushalmi passage that was talking about famine. A war is not famine, and there's different types of distress and different types. So it's not clear that this is in any way prohibited. But Bezrat Hashem, we should have better times and good relationships. Okay. So,